The galaxy had known peace once, or so humanity had thought. But the peace was shattered long ago when Earth, once the thriving jewel of the Milky Way, fell into chaos. The human race was scattered across the stars, its mighty cities reduced to rubble, its greatest technologies lost or abandoned in the wake of relentless alien invasions. Humanity fought back valiantly, but it was only a matter of time before the final blow would come. However, amidst the devastation, there remained one hope, one secret weapon so powerful that even the alien invaders trembled at the thought of it. The Leviathan, humanity's greatest achievement, a supercarrier unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It was said that the Leviathan could turn the tide of any battle. Designed as a warship capable of not only withstanding the most devastating attacks, but also delivering unimaginable firepower, it was humanity's last line of defense. But just as its final trials were completed, the Leviathan vanished. No one knew why, and the few who dared to ask about its whereabouts only received vague, cryptic answers. Some said the ship had been lost in a battle against a mysterious, unseen enemy. Others claimed it had been deliberately hidden away to keep it from falling into enemy hands. Whatever the reason, Earth's greatest weapon disappeared, and its loss became a tale of legend, whispered in the darkest corners of the galaxy. Years passed, and humanity's hope began to fade. The once mighty Earth was now a shadow of itself, its cities in ruins, its colonies scattered like fragments of a broken dream. Alien forces grew bolder, pushing humanity to the edge of extinction. The Resistance, made up of remnants of Earth's military and civilian survivors, had held on to one belief for all these years: the Leviathan would return. Some clung to this hope like a lifeline, while others dismissed it as nothing more than a myth. But the truth was, no one knew what had happened to the ship. It was as if the Leviathan had never existed at all. But then, something changed. A signal. A faint, almost imperceptible signal, like a whisper on the wind, was detected by a small group of Resistance scouts. At first, it seemed like a random glitch in the system, a mistake that could be easily ignored. But as the scouts analyzed the data further, the pattern became clearer. The signal was not random. It was coming from deep in uncharted space, an area of the galaxy long considered off-limits due to its proximity to hostile alien territories. The signal was coded, a series of numbers and symbols that, when decoded, pointed to a location that had been forgotten by all but a few. The coordinates led to a region of space believed to be a graveyard of lost ships, a place where no one dared to venture. At first, no one believed it. The idea of finding the Leviathan, after all these years, seemed impossible, even ridiculous. But as more Resistance leaders examined the data, their doubts began to fade. This wasn't a fluke. This wasn't a coincidence. Someone, or something, had sent this signal. And if there was any chance, however slim, that the Leviathan could still be found, it was worth the risk. The fate of humanity depended on it. Captain Maya Arden, a seasoned officer with the Resistance, was chosen to lead the mission. She was no stranger to danger, having survived countless battles, but this was different. This mission was her last chance to do something that could save Earth and her people. She gathered her crew, a mix of experienced veterans and eager young recruits who had heard the stories of the supercarrier but had never seen it with their own eyes. They were a diverse group, bound together by one shared goal: to find the Leviathan and bring it back to Earth. As they set course for the unknown, there was a palpable sense of anticipation in the air. The journey ahead was uncertain, filled with dangers and the unknown. They were heading into a part of the galaxy where few had gone, where even the bravest souls feared to tread. The crew knew they might never return. But for Captain Arden, and for all of them, this mission was more than just a chance at survival. It was a symbol of hope, a final opportunity to strike back against the alien forces that had terrorized their people for so long. The journey was long, and the deeper they went into uncharted space, the more eerie and unsettling the silence became. The crew felt as if they were being watched, as if something out there was aware of their every move. Strange, unexplainable phenomena began to occur. Systems malfunctioning, mysterious gravitational forces pulling at their ships, and fleeting glimpses of shapes in the distance. The crew remained on high alert, aware that they were not alone in this part of space. As days turned into weeks, tensions rose. The constant uncertainty wore on the crew, and doubts began to creep in. Was it worth it? Was this signal real, or were they chasing ghosts? But Captain Arden would not allow the crew to give up. She reminded them that this mission wasn't just about the ship. It was about survival, about humanity's fight to stay alive. With every passing day, their determination grew stronger. They pressed on, navigating through treacherous asteroid fields and dangerous space anomalies, keeping their eyes on the prize, the Leviathan. And then, just when they thought they could not go any further, they found it. The ship. The Leviathan lay in a forgotten corner of the galaxy, hidden among the remains of other, lesser vessels that had long since been abandoned. It was massive, its silhouette barely visible against the backdrop of a dark nebula. For a moment, there was silence. No one spoke. It was as if time had stopped. Captain Arden's heart raced as she looked upon the lost warship. It was real. The stories, the legends, everything was true. But there was one problem. The ship was in poor condition. Its once mighty hull was battered and worn, and its advanced systems lay dormant, as if the Leviathan had been waiting all these years for someone to find it. It was an ancient relic, a forgotten treasure buried beneath the sands of time. And now it was up to Captain Arden and her crew to unlock its secrets, to awaken the power that could save humanity. The crew's excitement was tempered by the daunting task ahead. They had found the Leviathan, but now they had to bring it back to life. And as the crew began their preparations to board the supercarrier, a new question hung in the air. What would they face when the ship's systems were awakened? Would the enemy be waiting for them? Or would they face something even more terrifying, an enemy they could not yet understand? The stakes had never been higher. Earth's fate rested on the shoulders of Captain Arden and her crew, and they knew they were about to face challenges unlike any they had ever known before. The journey ahead was fraught with danger, but they had no choice but to move forward. The salvation of humanity was within their grasp, and there was no turning back now. The silence of deep space hung heavily over the crew as they prepared for the unknown. Captain Maya Arden stood on the bridge of the fleet's flagship, the Eclipse, staring out at the vast expanse before them. Her hands rested on the cool surface of the command console, and for a moment, she allowed herself to feel the weight of the mission. The coordinates they had uncovered from the mysterious signal had led them into the heart of uncharted space, a place where no human had ventured for centuries. It was an area of the galaxy filled with danger, marked by abandoned ships, strange anomalies, and the ever-present threat of alien patrols. The crew was eager but anxious, uncertain about what lay ahead. The only thing they knew for certain was that they were the last hope for Earth. The journey ahead was not going to be easy. They had already faced obstacles, from malfunctioning navigational systems to unexplainable gravitational shifts that tugged at the ships, pulling them off course. The farther they traveled into uncharted space, the more unnatural the surroundings felt. It was as if the universe itself was trying to push them back, warning them to turn around. But Captain Arden's resolve was unshaken. She couldn't afford to let doubt creep in, not now. They had a mission to complete, and no matter what, they would see it through. The Eclipse cut through the darkness, its engines humming steadily as it pushed forward. The fleet, a small but determined force, followed in tight formation. On the decks of the other ships, the crew members remained vigilant, eyes constantly scanning the sensors for any sign of movement. The quiet hum of the engines was the only sound, broken only by the occasional buzz of a communicator or the soft murmur of conversations. No one spoke much. The tension in the air was thick, each crew member fully aware of the dangers they faced. Every few hours, Captain Arden would receive updates on the status of the fleet, But nothing out of the ordinary happened. No alien ships, no surprises. Yet that very stillness felt like a warning. Something was coming. She could feel it in her bones. As the days stretched on, the crew began to feel the weight of isolation. They were far from home, far from Earth, and the vast emptiness of space seemed to close in around them. There were moments when the silence became unbearable. The flickering lights of the ship felt oppressive, and even the smallest noise, a door creaking open, a distant beep from a console, seemed to echo through the corridors, unsettling the crew. Captain Arden had noticed a change in the behavior of her crew as well. Tensions were rising. Some of the younger recruits were nervous, whispering among themselves about the rumors they had heard of this part of space. Some believed it was cursed. Others spoke of ships that had disappeared, never to be heard from again. It was a place where the stars seemed dimmer, and the laws of physics didn't always seem to apply. On the fourth day of their journey, something unexpected happened. The Eclipse's sensors picked up an unusual disturbance in the nebula ahead. At first, it appeared to be a natural phenomenon, an unstable region of space where stars had recently gone supernova. But as they got closer, the anomaly began to take shape. It wasn't just a natural event. It was something more, something alive. The crew gathered in the command center, their faces pale as the readings on the screen began to spike. The disturbance was powerful, its energy unlike anything they had encountered before. A strange electromagnetic pulse emanated from the center of the nebula, disrupting the ship's systems and making communication impossible. It was as if the nebula itself had a mind, an intelligence, and it didn't want them there. "Captain," said Lieutenant Rowan, his voice tight with concern, "the disturbance is growing stronger. We should turn back." But Captain Arden's eyes remained fixed on the screens, her jaw clenched with determination. "We're too close," she replied, her voice steady. "We can't turn back now." The crew felt the tension in the air as the ship edged closer to the anomaly. The disturbance seemed to pulse, growing stronger with each passing moment. The Eclipse shook violently as the energy fields from the nebula began to ripple through the ship's hull. Sparks flew from some of the ship's circuits, and alarms blared as the systems struggled to stay online. The crew scrambled to make quick repairs, but they all knew they were running out of time. The anomaly was pulling them in, and no one knew what would happen if they got too close. Then, without warning, the disturbance flared, sending a shockwave through space. The Eclipse lurched violently, throwing crew members to the ground. The lights flickered, and for a moment, the ship seemed to lose all power. The crew fought to regain control, but it was no use. The ship was being pulled into the heart of the nebula. "Brace for impact," Captain Arden shouted, her voice calm but firm. The ship groaned as it was dragged deeper into the anomaly, the stars outside warping and twisting in strange, unnatural ways. It was as if reality itself was bending, and for a brief moment, the crew lost all sense of direction. The Eclipse seemed to be caught in a cosmic whirlpool, spinning uncontrollably. Everyone on board felt the overwhelming pull, their stomachs lurching as they were thrown from side to side. It seemed like they would never escape. Just as suddenly as it had started, the ship was released. The gravitational pull disappeared, and the Eclipse was hurled into the void, its engines sputtering and struggling to regain power. The crew was shaken, but they were alive. After a few moments of stunned silence, Captain Arden regained control of the ship. Her eyes narrowed as she surveyed the damage. They had made it through, but barely. The systems were down, and the fleet was scattered. "We're not alone," Captain Arden muttered under her breath, her heart pounding. The crew had barely survived, but there was something else out there, something that had been waiting for them. Outside the viewport, the nebula stretched on, a sea of dark clouds and flashing lights. But now, there were shapes within it, massive, shadowy figures, moving just beyond the edge of the ship's sensors. Alien ships, and they were closing in. The crew had no time to lose. The anomaly had been a warning, And now they were in the heart of enemy territory. The mission was no longer just about finding the Leviathan. It was about survival. They had come this far, but the real challenge was just beginning. The unknown had become a nightmare, and the crew was about to find out just how far they were willing to go to save humanity. Captain Arden's voice echoed through the intercom, her tone unwavering despite the fear that gripped the crew. All hands, prepare for battle. The deep, ominous hum of the eclipse reverberated through the ship's metal walls as Captain Maya Arden stood in the command center, staring at the viewport. The nebula outside had now become an eerie backdrop to their predicament. The massive, shadowy figures that had once seemed distant now loomed closer, their outlines becoming clearer. These weren't just any alien ships. They were ancient, their designs unfamiliar, covered in layers of dark energy and scarred metal. The unknown had suddenly become all too real. The crew was tense, eyes flicking nervously to the blinking lights of the control panels, but no one spoke. Captain Arden's mind raced. How had they gotten here? What was waiting for them? What do you think they want? Lieutenant Rowan's voice broke the silence, his tone tense. His hand hovered over the console, ready to act at any moment. I don't know, Captain Arden replied, her voice steady, though inside she could feel the pulse of fear creeping through her. But we need to be ready for anything. There's no going back now. Outside, the fleet's ships had scattered in the wake of the gravitational wave. They were now drifting, separated and vulnerable. And still, the alien ships approached, slowly, purposefully, as if they were calculating their next move. It was clear they were not just observing. They were waiting for something. Arden glanced at the tactical display, where a strange energy signal had begun to spike from within the nebula. The signal was coming from beneath the layers of swirling clouds, far deeper than they had gone before. It was unlike anything they had ever encountered. It was as if something was calling to them from within the heart of the nebula. Something ancient, something powerful. Captain, we've picked up another transmission, Lieutenant Rowan said urgently. It's faint, but it's definitely coming from the core of the nebula. Arden's brow furrowed. Bring it up on the screen, she ordered, her voice sharp. The ship's main display flickered to life, revealing a blurry pattern of lights and sounds. The transmission was garbled, nearly incomprehensible, but one word kept repeating in the static over and over. Leviathan. Leviathan. Captain Arden whispered under her breath. She had heard the name before, in the old records, legends of an ancient supercarrier built by humanity before they disappeared. The Leviathan was said to be more than just a ship. It was a weapon, an unstoppable force, capable of turning the tide in any battle. But it was also thought to be lost, hidden away somewhere in the galaxy, and no one had ever found it. Until now. What if the Leviathan is what's in the heart of the nebula? Rowan suggested, his voice barely above a whisper. He seemed almost afraid to speak the words aloud. Captain Arden did not answer immediately. She had already considered the possibility, but the thought of unleashing something so powerful, something so dangerous, was a heavy burden. The Leviathan could be their salvation, but it could also be their doom. Without warning, the ship lurched again, and alarms blared throughout the eclipse. The ship's artificial gravity fluctuated for a moment before stabilizing. Arden's eyes widened as the lights in the command center flickered. The strange electromagnetic pulses coming from the nebula had intensified, sending shockwaves through their systems. For a moment, the eclipse seemed to stall, its engines sputtering as if struggling to push through an invisible barrier. "We're losing power," shouted Lieutenant Hunter from the engineering station. His hands flew over the console, trying desperately to stabilize the systems. "This isn't just interference. Something is draining our energy. Shut down all non-essential systems," Captain Arden ordered. "We can't risk it. Everyone, hold tight." As the crew scrambled to follow orders, the ship continued to tremble, and a growing sense of urgency filled the air. Something was waking up in the nebula, something that had lain dormant for centuries. The eclipse was being drawn in, compelled by forces far beyond their understanding. Suddenly, a voice cut through the chaos. It was the voice of the ship's AI, known as Astra, calm yet filled with an underlying concern. "Captain, I'm detecting movement beneath the nebula's core. Something is rising. It's enormous." Arden's heart skipped a beat. Her instincts screamed at her to get out of the nebula, to retreat before they were too far gone. But the Leviathan was close. She could feel it. The transmissions were stronger now, and the mystery of what lay ahead had become too great to ignore. "We're too far in," she said, her voice resolute. "We need to push forward. All hands, prepare to move in closer to the heart of the nebula. The Leviathan is out there, and it's our only chance." With the crew at their posts, the Eclipse surged forward, its engines working overtime to cut through the gravitational forces. As they neared the center of the nebula, the view through the viewport darkened further, but there was something else, something that was beginning to take shape. A massive structure, partially obscured by clouds of gas and dust, began to materialize. It was colossal, more immense than anything Captain Arden had ever seen. It was a ship, a supercarrier, its hull scarred by the passage of time but still formidable. The Leviathan. The sight was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Its hull seemed to shimmer with a strange energy, as though it were alive, pulsing with an ancient power. Captain Arden could feel the ship vibrating beneath her feet, as if the very air around them was charged with the energy of the Leviathan. Then, without warning, the ship's massive hangar doors opened, revealing a vast, dark interior. The Eclipse was being pulled closer, as though the Leviathan was calling it in. And then, as they drew near, something incredible happened. A voice, clear and unmistakable, boomed throughout the Eclipse. It wasn't coming from any speaker. It was coming from the ship itself. "Humanity has returned. The Leviathan awakens." Captain Arden's blood ran cold. There was no turning back now. They had found it, and they had awakened it. The Leviathan was alive, and it was waiting for them. Captain Maya Arden stood on the bridge of the Eclipse, staring at the dark expanse of space stretching out before them. The nebula had faded into the distance, and now, as the ship continued its journey, a quiet tension hung in the air. They had done the impossible. They had awakened the Leviathan. Now, they were headed home. The journey back to Earth had begun, but the reality of their situation weighed heavily on her. What had they unleashed? The Leviathan was far more than just a ship. It was a weapon, and not just any weapon, one with the power to reshape the galaxy. Behind her, the crew worked diligently, their faces reflecting a mixture of awe and fear. No one had ever seen a vessel like the Leviathan. It was a relic of the past, but it was not forgotten. They could feel its presence, its power, even though it was dormant for centuries. As the ship cruised through the void, Captain Arden couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, not just by the alien forces that had been lurking around them, but by the Leviathan itself. It was almost as if the ship was studying them, judging their worth. A sudden beep from the communications console brought her back to reality. Lieutenant Rowan, his face tense, looked up from his station. "Captain, we've received a transmission from Earth. It's urgent." Arden's heart skipped a beat. Earth. The last time they had heard from their homeworld was years ago, and since then, the universe had changed. The transmission was scrambled, but the message was clear. Earth was in danger. A powerful alien force had appeared, a fleet so large that it had overwhelmed Earth's defenses. The message was brief, but it left no room for doubt. Earth was under siege, and unless help arrived soon, humanity's home would be lost forever. "We're almost there," Arden said, her voice steady, but with a sharp edge. "Prepare for immediate jump to Earth's coordinates. We don't have much time." The crew moved quickly, each of them knowing what was at stake. The Leviathan was their only hope, but even now, they didn't fully understand its power. The ancient ship had seemed almost sentient when they had first encountered it, reacting to their presence like a living being. Now they needed to unlock its full potential, if they could. The eclipse jumped into faster-than-light travel, the stars stretching into long streaks of light as they crossed the galaxy in mere moments. But even as the ship moved at incredible speeds, there was no sense of security. The transmission had left one question burning in Arden's mind. Who were these invaders? And why had they waited so long to attack Earth? Had they known that humanity's greatest weapon was dormant, waiting for the right moment to awaken? Or was this all part of a larger plan, a strategy designed to crush humanity once and for all? The answer, Captain Arden knew, was something they would have to find out the hard way. As they neared Earth, the eclipse began to shake. The ship was still adjusting to the Leviathan's influence, and though they were in a different part of space, the energy surrounding them was undeniable. It felt as though the Leviathan was drawing them in, guiding them closer to their destination. With each passing moment, it became harder to ignore the sense that they were not alone, that something was watching them. The shadows in the corners of the bridge seemed to grow longer, and the silence was broken only by the hum of the ship's systems. "We're almost there," Rowan said, his voice tinged with a mix of awe and uncertainty. "Earth's gravity is pulling us in." Arden stood firm, her hand resting on the edge of the command console. "Lock onto Earth's coordinates. We can't afford to miss our landing." The planet loomed larger on the viewport, its blue oceans and green continents a stark contrast to the cold, empty expanse of space. The sight should have been comforting, but instead, it sent a wave of dread through Arden's chest. This was Earth. This was home. But how much of it would be left by the time they arrived? Just as they began their descent into Earth's atmosphere, a warning light flashed across the control panel. "Captain, we have incoming ships." "They're not human," Rowan reported, his voice tight with alarm. "Where are they coming from?" Arden demanded, her pulse quickening. "They've just emerged from the edge of the system. It looks like a full fleet," Rowan replied. "They're massive, Captain, and they're heading straight for Earth." Arden gritted her teeth. There was no time to waste. The Eclipse was equipped with advanced weapons, but it was no match for the alien fleet closing in. It wasn't just a battle for Earth's survival, it was a battle for humanity's future. If they couldn't defeat this alien force, then everything they had fought for, everything they had risked, would be in vain. "Activate the Leviathan systems," Captain Arden ordered. Her voice was low, steady, but inside, she was anything but calm. "We need to see what this ship can really do." The ship hummed to life as the ancient systems came online, the energy around them intensifying. The Leviathan seemed to pulse with a strange energy, and as it did, Captain Arden could feel the connection deepening, like the ship was responding to their presence, becoming one with them. "What are we looking at?" Arden asked, her eyes scanning the display as the first wave of alien ships entered Earth's orbit. We're gaining power, Captain," Rowan said, his voice filled with disbelief. "It's like the Leviathan is amplifying our weapons. It's giving us the strength we need to face them." A flash of light from outside interrupted their conversation. The alien fleet had opened fire. The blast hit the Eclipse, sending the ship into a violent spin. But before Arden could even react, a massive shockwave rippled through space, emanating from the Leviathan. It was as if the ship had unleashed a force of nature, a tidal wave of energy that blasted through the enemy's lines. "Direct hit on their flagship," Rowan shouted. "It's..." His voice faltered as he looked at the readout. The alien ships had started to break apart, their armor buckling under the intensity of the Leviathan's energy. But the battle was far from over. The alien fleet was massive, and though their first wave had been repelled, more ships were coming. The Leviathan was powerful, but it wasn't invincible. Captain Arden knew this was just the beginning. "We need to end this now," Arden said, her voice filled with determination. "Earth's survival depends on it." With the Leviathan at their side, they would fight to the end. But the true test had only just begun. Would humanity's ancient weapon be enough to stop the invaders, Or was this just the first chapter in a war that would decide the fate of the entire galaxy? The battle had reached its peak. Captain Maya Arden stood on the bridge of the Eclipse, her heart pounding as she watched the alien fleet loom before them. The Leviathan had awakened fully, its power surging through the ship, but it wasn't enough. The alien forces were relentless, their ships vast and numerous. Despite the initial victory, the enemy was regrouping, and they were stronger than ever. The first wave had been a shock to them all. But now, reality settled in. The true extent of the threat was clear. "Captain, their fleet is advancing again," Lieutenant Rowan said, his voice filled with tension. "They're closing in fast. We can't keep them at bay for much longer." Arden's eyes flickered to the viewport. The stars around them seemed to darken as the enemy fleet tightened its formation. The sheer number of ships was overwhelming. Even with the Leviathan's power coursing through the eclipse, it wasn't enough to keep them all at a distance. The air on the bridge felt heavy with the weight of the impending battle, and the crew was silent, their focus unwavering. "Prepare for another engagement," Captain Arden ordered, her voice calm but firm. "Activate all systems. We fight for Earth." She could feel the power of the Leviathan coursing through her, a strange connection that had only deepened since they had first awakened the ancient ship. It was as if the Leviathan was not just a weapon but a living entity, and it was now working with them, responding to their need for strength, for victory. But no matter how much power they had, there was no guarantee that it would be enough. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about defeating an enemy that had no mercy. As the enemy ships neared, the Eclipse launched into action. The massive cannons fired, sending bright beams of energy toward the incoming fleet. The Leviathan's power amplified the weapons, causing the beams to strike with a force unlike anything they had ever seen. But the enemy fleet responded with equal fury, launching waves of missiles that struck the Eclipse with explosive force. The ship shuddered under the impact, alarms blaring as the shields flickered, struggling to hold. "Shields holding at 30%, Rowan reported, his hands moving quickly over the controls. "We can't take many more hits like this." Arden gritted her teeth. Earth depended on them. She couldn't allow it to fall. Not after everything they had been through. "Keep firing. Don't stop until every last one of them is gone." The crew followed her orders without hesitation, but despite their best efforts, the alien fleet was closing in. The battle was taking its toll on the Eclipse. Their weapons were powerful, but the enemy ships were larger, heavily armored, and bristling with advanced technology. It seemed as though they were always one step ahead, predicting their moves and countering them with precision. It was a battle of attrition, and they were losing. Just as Captain Arden was about to give another order, a deep rumble echoed through the ship. A shockwave rippled from the Leviathan. And for a moment, it felt like time itself had slowed. The energy from the ancient ship surged, filling the Eclipse with a blinding light. The walls of the bridge seemed to hum with power, and Captain Arden's heart raced. She knew this feeling. This was it, the moment when the Leviathan would reveal its true potential. "Captain," Rowan shouted, his voice filled with disbelief. "The Leviathan is. It's enhancing everything. The weapons, the shields, they're all stronger than before." "Do it," Arden commanded, her voice steady despite the rising chaos. "Full power to the weapons. We end this now." The Leviathan responded. The ship's systems roared to life, and in an instant, the Eclipse became a vessel of unimaginable power. The cannons fired again, but this time, the beams were so powerful that they cut through the alien fleet like a hot knife through butter. Ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light, their wreckage drifting into the void. The alien fleet faltered, momentarily stunned by the overwhelming force they were facing. But the enemy wasn't finished. From the heart of their fleet, a massive ship emerged. It was their flagship, the one pulling the strings behind the entire invasion. It was enormous, dwarfing the other ships in the fleet, and it radiated an ominous energy. Arden's eyes locked onto it, as the crew on the bridge held their breath. This was the final challenge. "Target the flagship," Arden ordered. "This ends now." With the Leviathan enhancing their firepower, the Eclipse unleashed a barrage of energy blasts. The flagship retaliated with devastating force, its weapons blazing. The ship rocked violently as the impact struck. Sparks flew from the consoles, and the lights flickered. But Arden stood firm, her focus never wavering. They could not lose. Not now. The Leviathan seemed to pulse in response, its ancient power amplifying their efforts. The energy beams grew brighter, stronger, more concentrated. They struck the alien flagship with pinpoint accuracy. The first shot tore through its shields, the second breached its armor, and the third blasted straight through its core. The alien flagship exploded in a massive burst of energy, its pieces scattering in all directions. For a moment, everything was silent. The remaining alien ships hesitated, their formations breaking apart as their leadership crumbled. The Eclipse and the Leviathan had won. The battle was over. Captain Arden allowed herself a brief sigh of relief, but she knew this wasn't just a victory for the Eclipse. It was a victory for all of humanity. They had fought to save Earth, and they had succeeded. The alien invaders were scattered, their fleet in ruins, and Earth's survival was secured. For now. "We did it," Rowan said, his voice filled with disbelief and awe. "Not just us," Arden replied, her eyes on the stars beyond. "We did it together. Earth's salvation is because of all of us." As the crew celebrated, Captain Arden turned her gaze back to the Leviathan. The ship had played a crucial role in their success, but what was it really? A weapon, a living entity. She didn't have the answers, but she knew one thing for certain. The Leviathan had given them the strength they needed to survive the impossible. And now, Earth was safe, for the moment. But the galaxy was vast, and who knew what other challenges lay ahead? They had won this battle, but the war was far from over. As the Eclipse began its journey back to Earth, the crew knew that their fight for humanity's future had only just begun. The Leviathan was more than just a ship. It was a symbol of hope, of strength, and of the power of humanity to survive, no matter the odds. And as long as they had the Leviathan at their side, they knew that no force in the galaxy could stop them.